Welcome, listeners and viewers. So excited for this first episode and first season of what I hope will be a continuous series of the podcast Policy for Normal People. I'm your host, Christy Amata of Amata Development Services, LLC. I'm an independent consultant in marketing, communications, and fundraising, helping businesses and nonprofits raise awareness of their brands and raise revenue. You can check me out at my website, amatadevservices.com. The purpose of Policy for Normal People podcast, however, is sort of a experiment long time in coming for me. I have since youth been interested in everything from foreign affairs, policy issues at every level of government, and really just a curious observer, as I'm sure many of you are. I am launching this podcast not to be the expert as much as to invite experts on to talk about policy and help me break down and understand the complexities and the intersection between policy and how it impacts you and me, everyday regular Americans, at the ground level, at ground zero of our lives, at our kitchen tables, with our families, and our quality of life. One thing that this podcast will not be is about politics. I have no interest in talking about politics. There's plenty of that going on right now and continuously will. What I'm interested in is talking about policy once it is in fact law or in place in a way that is truly going to impact our lives for better or worse, without all of the political side notes. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce, and I'm super excited that you're here, Marcus Sturdivant of Indian Head, North Carolina. Marcus is a independent business owner as well. He's the founder of ABC Squared. He's a financial advisor and teaches financial literacy to folks. And Marcus, I'm going to turn this over to you to introduce yourself, but I gotta say first, I was just so excited to see your tagline. I came across your amazing profile on LinkedIn. Folks, definitely check out Marcus and his financial services, what he offers at ABC Squared. His tagline is helping Main Street meet Wall Street. And when you think about what I just said about policy for normal people, and that normal meaning, you and me, the everyday American, just trying to go about our lives, trying to make sense of all the things that are going on where policy and legislation is concerned, but still trying to, get our kids off to school and get to work and so forth. Marcus, tell us about yourself. Tell us about ABC Squared, and especially that what that tagline means to you as part of your mission.
All right. Hey, first of all, thanks, Christy, for having me on. Very excited to be on
You got it.
Policy for Normal People. Very excited. Yeah, so the ABC Squared is a financial planning firm that I run RIA down here in Indian Trail, North Carolina. Um, the tagline Main Street meets Wall Street is just something that I really am passionate about, helping people understand what can be complex ideas in a simple way. It seems as if maybe Wall Street has had the advantage, I guess, for a long time. They had the information, but now information has been disseminated in such a way that anyone can access market information, financial information. We have uh, the internet where anything's available instantly. So that really lowers once it's proven that once information is available to people, it lowers the standard where people can learn. So with that being said, there's a lot of information out there that may not be the best. It may not be the soundest. So I'm just out here trying to help people who don't understand, kind of like you said, normal people understand complex things in a simple way. So Main Street meets Wall Street.
Appreciate that, Marcus. And that is so in alignment with policy for normal people. Just trying to make sense of a very complex world. And it's interesting what you say about the additional access to information that we have. You and I have talked offline about how we grew up and how information access has changed so much since we were kids. Um, for good or bad, though, sometimes there's information overload and the complexity of all of it. is still just as complex as ever, if not more so, because you're trying to sift through what's misinformation, what's true, what's false. And to some extent, that's always been the case. But access doesn't always necessarily mean acquisition of true knowledge or the understanding of what's going on. So, without further ado, I am excited to get into the topic. It's a complex topic. The for better or worse, named Big Beautiful Bill. As we know, President Trump signed the bill into law on Friday. And so, what I'd like to do is give us a scenario, Marcus, and just sort of have a casual conversation about, based on that scenario that I start us off with, what are some things that you see in terms of policy impact from the Big Beautiful Bill? So let's say, for example, a kind of quintessential American family of four. You have a dad and mom, maybe mid 40s, two minor children that are, elementary, middle school, somewhere in there. This is a family that maybe makes about 200,000 a year gross salary between the two. Dad is a small business startup consultant, a lot like myself. Let's just use that. And mom is, let's say, a school teacher. I was a school teacher for 20 some years in my origin state of West Virginia, so I have some feeling and understanding of what that profession has, both in terms of good and bad, in raising a family, income, and so forth. Um, so you're talking about a family that has, state insurance, likely through mom, because state insurance, for the most part, has been traditionally pretty good for teachers in most states. But again, this is a broad overview. This is going to be a family that has, like so many, a home mortgage, um, and possibly lives in one of the, we'll say, average lower middle to low income states that went red in the 2020 election. So there's about nine of those. Again, we're not getting into politics, but I want to mention it in that context simply because there are going to be a significant amount of families in states like this that are going to be affected by all sorts of provisions in the bill, some of whom are probably going to fall through some cracks. They're going to qualify for some things they're not, some are going to phase out. So kind of want to get into that. So with that sort of scenario, and I know it's kind of a general broad category, and we'll tweak it along the way. But a family like that, let's take for instance the 2017 job and tax cut permanence that had been now put in the bill, that has been made permanent. Um, what do you say about that in terms of how this is going to be beneficial or not to a family like I just described?
Got you. So yeah, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so pick and choose what you want to talk about.
But that actually, that affects way more Americans than people realize. People even usually think of the ultra rich or the quote unquote poor or poverty stricken. Uh, and $200,000 for a family of four, you're not really in either class.
Yeah.
So you're kind of in the middle, a sandwich type situation where with this particular bill, you're not poor enough, quote unquote, to reap some of the tax credits, but you're not rich enough to get some of the tax deductions. So in that situation, um, a family like this, they will see that the tax cuts have been extended, so their income tax will obviously be lower, keeping their lower federal income tax bracket. The child care credit was increased a little bit. I think it
Mhm.
went from like 2,000.
2,200, yeah.
So
Hmm. Yeah.
10% there. The salt cap, I don't know how the salt cap will affect this family as far as that tends to affect people with property, like extra property. So
Hmm.
they only have one home and they're in that tax bracket, maybe not. But if they were earning higher, maybe 400,000, 500,000, had several properties, that's where that higher limit in the salt tax could help as well. As far as, being a business owner for um, the husband in the situation, this the Tax Cut and Job Act from 2017, which was codified and extended, does provide some benefits there, as far as helping with qualified business income, things
Hmm.
that type of credits and deductions. So it's just a lot of things in there. As far as with planning for children, they're actually, if they already have two little children and one wasn't born in this year or the next year, they're going to miss out on the Trump baby accounts.
Hmm.
So, and if they're not planning on having any more children, they're going to miss that benefit. So there's just a lot of different things that they're tied up in with this particular tax bracket.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned a couple of key things there, and I'll just kind of bounce around to a few. As I said in the beginning, we don't have any intention of being able to cover the whole thing, but just wanted to, hit on a few highlights. So the baby credit, it's $1,000, and my understanding is that parents can contribute as well, right? They can contribute up to 2,500 a year, I think it is, maybe, something like that. And apparently, there's other stipulations, so the child can use that. It's going to be put into a savings account. Do you have you come across any specifics of how that's all going to be frameworked or structured? Is it going to be um, just a direct deposit from the government that you then have to show proof that you've set it up as a savings account?
Uh, yeah, so I think the government will set up the accounts. You have to go through maybe a portal of some sort. I don't know if they've worked out those actual details, but the account itself will be structured where newborn children, like I said, from this year and moving forward, will have $1,000 deposited into a savings account for them at a pre-tax basis. This money grows tax deferred until they reach, I think they have an opportunity to take it out at 18, where they can take a certain amount of money out with a penalty. No, it's not a penalty, but it won't be the same amount of money as if they let it grow. I think they can let it grow to like 25 or 35 after that.
Yeah.
They can use it for certain things like buying a home. So that would be a good investment, if home buying is something that they're looking for. That seems to be a
I think
pressure
it's
for
first
them.
time home buyers, right? Yeah. So young folks. Yeah, my daughter just she and her husband are a young couple like that. They just bought their home, and so, it'd probably be had this happen back, when they were babies, though, it would have been good for them for that. Yeah, and I think age 30, I think, is it that they can convert it into a Roth account if they have not withdrawn beforehand, is my
Gotcha. Yeah. And then at that point, you will have to pay taxes on it. So that's one of the things that I kind of wonder about with the bill is why is this a pre-tax account if they're using our tax dollars to pay for it? Shouldn't that already be after tax money? But that's probably in the plumbing size because it's really kind of like a large loan to the government itself. Once these accounts become, uh, once you cash in these accounts, then you have to pay your taxes on them. But having Americans set up with savings accounts so they can grow, and that's a very good thing. The ins and outs of whether it's more beneficial to this group or that group. That's in the details. One thing I would like to point out is that it's been interesting to see that this account, because there are a lot of Americans who don't have children, or Americans like us who don't have little children anymore. So we're
right.
essentially going to pay for this, whereas people were in uproars about student loans.
Mm.
So because people who didn't go to college didn't feel it was fair to pay back student loans for everyone. So it's just
Right.
we'll see
Yeah.
how that plays out in the long
Point.
run.
Yeah, a good point. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw where, this baby credit, this $1,000 is only going to be till 2028. So is this some kind of game that's being played with, the expiration dates, which we know happens a lot, and that's a very bipartisan game that gets played. I'm not, again, no politics, but 2028, I think, is the so that's a small window, 2025 to 2028, and is it even smaller than that? Like, does it actually start in 2026? That I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think all the things in this bill go into effect next year.
Yeah.
So pretty much. Um, yeah, it's definitely with the thing with the tax deduction that you have going on there versus the tax credit that
Hmm.
you will receive in that situation. So it's just it's all tied up in the details.
Yeah. And if you had like this same family, for instance, that lived in, say, a much higher cost state, California, New York, something like that, you referred to the salt tax. I mean, what kind of issues do you see there? They're increasing it to 40,000, I believe, from 10. So significant increase. Um, was that some kind of compromise that you think is beneficial, or is it still have some risks that we're not seeing right off?
We can find ways to save taxpayers dollars without increasing the deficit. That's always a benefit, in my opinion. One thing to point out, as you were stating earlier with the child's accounts, a lot of these tax deductions actually expire in 2028, but the tax credits are made permanent. So
Mm,
the deductions favor lower income families, while the credits tend to favor like the upper 1%. It's
okay.
just another interesting juxtaposition there. Like a lot of things we're talking about will fade out from in 2028 unless are codified in the law again.
Yeah. And so, and I'm also thinking, about so, what is seems like out of the gate, it's a win for a lot of people, more money in your pocket in the short term, but you can expect in a very short time, because a year goes by pretty quick, a couple years goes by very quick, um, it looks like it's only going to skew towards the upper class in terms of income benefits from the continuations of both the 2017 job and tax cut, and then also just the way you described the credits and deductions are working, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and another thing to look at with this type of bill, it was pay me now, pay me later, either or type situation when they use the reconciliation process.
Hmm.
We're comparing a bill to compare the cost of a bill versus the cost of if the government actually did nothing, right? So immediately once you reinstate if you lost the tax credits from the Tax Cut Job Act of 2017, that would be a huge boom to uh, well, actually, it'll be a huge loss of income to Americans. Huge
Mm.
boom for the government and tax dollars revenues received. So just another thing to
Mm.
pay attention to.
Yeah. So about student loans, I was a little confused in some of the things I was reading about forgiveness. It says that what I was reading was that forgiving loans that starting in 2026, any loans that had been forgiven, but I didn't see where it had like a range or a time frame on that, or if they're just talking about during the last administration or when. But regardless, that was going to be taxable income at some point after 2026. So. Um, that could be a significant, it seems to me like that could be a significant setback for young people who are trying to get a higher education. What's your thought on that?
Exactly. And as you said, with the student loans and the whole process, this administration, this has been a complete juxtapose to the last one with the student loan forgiveness. I honestly don't expect any type of student loan forgiveness to really continue to grow. If anything, they're going to continue to pull those back, rein those back. I mean, the Supreme Court said that they were unconstitutional, so they had the
Yeah.
judiciary say that. So I think it's going to be tougher to borrow money to go to school unless you're borrowing it from private institutions. And if this becomes taxable income, and with the government's push to help Americans go back to trade schools and seek out vocational jobs where you're earning six figures and can make a comfortable living in America,
Hmm.
it works. Whereas you wouldn't need necessarily high student loans to go out to expensive four-year university. So the whole process is shifting. But yes, if your student loans become like taxable income, that would be really hurtful to the people. A lot of Americans have student loans averaging, I think, around 40 to $50,000. So
Yeah, that's probably the average, and it certainly gets higher when you get into more professional degrees, medicine, law, that kind of thing, engineering. Yeah, that's interesting. Uh, I kind of have a general concern about as much as we heard all this talk about cutting government waste, and I think in a general sense, everybody would agree that government comes with its bureaucracy by nature, at all levels, and there's always room for a good old fashioned audit, and if it's objective, and trying to clear out any kind of inconsistencies. I think about Medicaid. Um, I'll be honest. I have known people, nice people, but people who nonetheless have the ability to work in some type of job, but are still getting assistance. And then I've known others who have continually reapplied, been denied, and don't, and are in far worse shape physically, mentally, or what have you, and unable to do most jobs. Um, so I would say that I've observed some unfairness in the system and some inconsistencies that, whether they're intentional or not, probably not. They happen anyway, probably, in the way that things are administered. But I'm not real confident, and I wonder what you think in we talk about what the cost of all this is going to be. There's going to be some costs involved in additional bureaucracy to administer, like for instance, the work requirements, right, for Medicaid. So, as we make cuts, there's also going to be costs. And of course, we know that the overall concern is a $2 to $3 trillion deficit, if not more, I think, from just the extension of, I think, the job and tax cuts alone, and the permanency of that, and then additional expenses on top of that. So I'm just kind of curious what you think about the trade-offs in how we're looking at cuts, and that's getting framed in one way or another as a benefit to people, as money going back into your pocket, and it's even framed in some circles as more efficiency. But is it more efficient? What do you think? Is it going to be less costly?
So we can even go from the example we were just at with the student loans, right? There was a point not too long ago where we were cutting out people in the student loan department and people were applying for student loan forgiveness or student loan pauses, but the system was so backed up that they couldn't even get their applications through. So
Mm.
that's one example of how those things are happening, right? Where you're cutting efficiencies in one way. It's like you're taking a little bit with this hand, but you're giving a lot more with the other hand. Just pull it from there and take it to the other side. As far as just the actual way that Medicaid is, so the Medicaid is going to be cut, right? It's cut going out to rural areas. I'm down here in North Carolina. Senator Tillis fell on a sword over. He's retiring from the Senate over what the people down here in North Carolina are going to face, because we're going to be hit the hardest, some of the hardest in the country, just with the phase out. People talk about people losing coverage, which is a terrible thing. But say the family of 200 with $200,000, right? They don't have Medicaid. They're not going to lose coverage. But when the other people in the community start to lose coverage and the community in general starts to get sicker, it's going to cost more for them when they go to the doctor, or it's going to cost more for them when they go to the doctor in general, just because they have to pay more premiums to cover for the people who aren't paying for the premiums. It's also going to be uh, so these costs are going to be pushed down. The federal government are eliminating them, just kind of pushing them down to the states. So if the states have to absorb some of these costs, they only have so much of a budget. So that part is also going to affect cuts for other areas inside of the state, right? So
Yeah.
it's like six here, half a dozen there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Marcus. I find the whole discussion about what is the cuts are ultimately going to be and who's going to be affected, both in terms of access to health care, Medicaid, but general healthcare services, the cost of that, the cost of insurance premiums for even private insurance, that sort of thing. And when you think about provider taxes, right? I know one of the arguments that Tillis and others had was how that was going to possibly affect the state of North Carolina and other states that were in similar situations. Um, I almost feel like it's a no-win situation for the taxpayer, regardless, the premium payer, because But feel free to push back or add something to that. But you've got this what seems like this situation of, and I know even President Biden had called it a scam. The provider tax thing, where you tax a hospital, the state rather taxes the hospital, then they collect that money, send it back right back to the hospitals, and claim it as state payments towards the program, towards Medicaid, so that they can submit to the federal government for the federal government's share and match, when in reality it was the same money. So I guess the broader concern is the state that has that in place. And I know North Carolina, I think, has the trigger law, right, where it's going to eliminate the law for Medicaid provisions altogether if the state can't utilize, I think it was like at 6%, that provider tax, and it's not gone in the bill, as I understand it. It's just lowered. So that's a whole other issue. But the provider tax issue, what is your feeling about um, who's who's going to get caught in the middle of that? There seems to be a game going on, perhaps, if that's the right word to use. I'm not assuming that, but it seems kind of fishy to me. You tax a hospital, you collect the tax, then you give it back, and you say, well, this is the state giving money to match the federal funds that they would then get at that same rate. What do you think about all of that conversation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on and all that. I mean, like you said, so for something to be taxed or to be a tax deduction, you have to have actual income. You have to have income of some sort to actually have a tax deduction or a tax credit against it, right? So what you're saying is with this trigger is that they're just going to take the money that they already have, so income, and then they're going to use it as a credit, and they're going to send it back as more income, and then at the time somehow get switched back again as a credit. It's just a lot of paperwork. It's going to get pushed out once again, more so to that $200,000 family, right? Because
Mhm.
they're not reaping the benefits of any of this. The healthcare providers are going to raise their premiums because they're paying for healthcare. That family needs healthcare. Your small business owner, his wife state pensions, as we speak about, you said his wife has a state pension fund. Some things that may be hurt in these cuts may be pension funds as they try to make up for um, this expanded stress on the state government to cover certain areas in healthcare costs. The
Mhm.
reasons they give you tax credits or tax benefits are they think that it's an overall benefit to the uh, good of the people, right? So if people have health care, less people will be sick. There'll be less of a burden on the government to take care of sick people when they get older, right?
Yeah.
Lower Medicare, Medicaid costs. So that kind of played into the tax credits that people will get in that position. But it just seems like a lot of onus is being shifted right back to the um, states. And if you dove into any government agency, especially healthcare, because I mean these some of these providers were just sending back whatever bills and the states were immediately paying. Like no one's like going back and looking at it.
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah.
lot to find in there. They needed to Doge just to Doge the healthcare part.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of a perfect storm in a way of the inability, especially right now, to kind of see past the fog and smoke of what all has actually happened. And I'm sure that down the road we'll even consider what we've talked about here, and it'll look a little different. But I think at the end of the day we're in kind of saying the same thing, that whether or not the state, any state, not just North Carolina, is playing some sort of game with the federal government to, match funds that weren't really newly collected funds in the first place. That's one thing, but it seems to me that even in doing that, it would have already caused premiums to go up for the patient on their end, especially those with private insurance. And I don't see how this bill fixes that. And it doesn't eliminate provider tax payments, it just reduces them. So you're right about it puts more pressure on the states, but um, to increase their portion, I guess, in paying for Medicaid. Um, but you kind of had a strange situation in the first place where, as I said, it seemed like a bipartisan complaint that there was a scam going on there with, states claiming to provide a match that they weren't really providing, that it was sort of just shifting money around in accounts for a little bit and calling it one thing now, calling it something else later. Um, I know it was reduced, like I say, to I think about 3% in the bill that just passed, and I'm kind of wondering, well, if they were concerned about having that provider tax at all, why did they still keep at least 3%? Aren't the states, even though they may be matching at a lower rate, there's still going to be a match there. I think that's good. I mean, that means that there'll be some federal money available, but it'll be definitely be less. So it's all very convoluted in the way that the money is getting passed around and who's getting it. But I feel like the taxpayer always, who's paying the premium especially, is kind of the loser in either of those scenarios, just to different degrees, perhaps. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, but I don't see it solving anything.
Right. And I don't even think like the way they went into the initiative with some of the things they said they want to do. So I think the limit you're talking about, I believe it's like 50 billion in that fund somewhere for Medicaid, Medicare, state, the provider tax. And I think so when this was proposed, it was to eliminate, like you said, work requirements, people who probably don't need Medicaid, Medicare, and they're out here getting full benefits when they could possibly be out earning. I don't know everyone's situation. So,
Mhm.
but you know people, like you said, who actually need it, and they
Yeah,
can't
they
because
can't get it. Yeah.
process is so cumbersome. Ties back to your point before, where there's if you're cutting the workforce because you're reducing that area by the federal government, then these people are also struggling to get through the system just to get seen and helped.
Exactly, exactly. It's clogged either way, whether you're truly eligible or not. I completely agree. And it just seems to me that there were issues of efficiency and fraud, intentional or not before, that aren't being fixed with this situation, with this bill. It's just a matter of cutting without correcting, perhaps. Um, so Um, I want to keep us on time here. I know we and I talked that we're going to do these episodes in 45-minute intervals, and we wouldn't cover everything, all at the same time. Um, but what else, Marcus, would you like to touch on that we haven't today? And I'm going to share with our listeners and viewers that, as I just said, I think we would love to have Marcus back if he's willing to join me again, and we'll hit some other specifics about the bill and how it affects maybe seniors, specific scenarios with people who maybe have severely disabled family members that they're taking care of. I have friends who, have children even that are going to need assistance for the rest of their lives just because of unfortunate circumstances that they were born with and medical conditions, very expensive medications, you name it. And I know that we bounce around, talked a lot about a lot of things here, kind of using our broad scenario of the four-person family. Um, but is there anything else that you'd like to touch on to kind of wrap up today, Marcus?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. And yeah, of course, I would love to be back on.
Absolutely.
We'll go deeper into the subjects and different subjects. Just thinking more with this family that we were talking about earlier. I mean, they're going to, they're too wealthy for most credits and too poor for the deductions. And the reason why that matters is because credits actually like reduce your dollar for dollar income at the top line, right? So that's
Okay.
$1,000, and $1,000 is the same whether you're in the 10% tax bracket or whether you're in the 37% tax bracket.
Yeah.
Whereas the deduction is that's going to affect your income after that in the tax rate. So if you're the same $1,000, if you're in the 10% tax bracket, that's $100. Whereas if you're in the 37% tax bracket, that would be like $370, right? So,
Yeah.
but the actual top line credit is more important for your income. So
Mm.
just pointing that out. And then there are a lot of people who just are in this small business owner, teacher's family of two. I mean, they just they can't get the full benefits either way that it goes. There's nothing new in there to help them with their child care, really, like subsidies of that sort. There's not really many expansions for the healthcare, if anything is contracting. So It's nothing really to help them with inflation as far as some of these.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that. The
Like none of them,
inflation,
yeah,
tariffs.
right. Few of them actually are tagged to inflation, so they don't actually increase. They actually phase out, especially for people in this income level. So
Mm,
just, yeah, we'll have to talk about the deficit next time because this increases the deficit. Those kids we're talking about, if it's, I guess, depending on which side of the CBO scoring you're on, one side says that tariffs will pay for this along with the uh, structuring of globalized trade and will actually earn money in the next 10 years, whereas the way it was scored is going to increase the deficit from the CBO. So these kids that we're talking about now, let's say they're 3 and 5, they'll be seeing the reaping the benefits of this in 10 years.
yeah. And, to your point, and kind of to also wrap up, I mean, I just saw today where President Trump is still going back and forth about what tariff is going to land where. There's several countries, South Korea, Japan, Myanmar, and so forth, anywhere between 20% to 40% again. And it's sort of this, um, you know, make an offer, pull it back, make another offer, pull it back again. It's a very yo-yo scenario, and I know that that makes investors incredibly nervous. So that's been going on now for, since the beginning of his term this time. So yeah, let's definitely plan on focusing on that a little bit more specifically next time. And we'll start with this scenario and tweak it a little bit and change who some of our people are. I know that listeners are probably wanting to know a little bit more, for instance, about what all this might mean for seniors. Who are already in retirement or edging towards retirement or something. And I'm sure you do too, Marcus, but I know a lot of seniors who still work a part-time job even though they're quote unquote retired, but just need some extra income to maybe pay for medicine if nothing else. So, as we see cuts to medical research, we see cuts, to you know, hospitals and things. I mean, it's all of these things are kind of coming together, as I said, as a potential perfect storm. Thank you so much for being with me today. It was great to get your perspective, and I look forward to having you on next time as well. Let's continue this conversation, and as we said, we'll get into a little bit more about the deficit and tariffs. But I think it was a great start. I know I learned a few things, and to our listeners and viewers, please contact us. You can contact me directly in email at amatadevservices@gmail.com. I also have a Substack called The Narrative Effect at christyamada.substack.com. You can feel free to listen to the podcast again there and subsequent episodes and leave comments. I will open it for comments this time and next. And Marcus, is there any particular place that folks can reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Marcus Sturdivant Senior on LinkedIn. They can check out my company's website, theabcsquared.com. You can always just email me if they like. Uh,
Okay.
Emails on the website, or they can reach out to you, Christy. You can tell them how to find me as well.
Absolutely. I will do that, Marcus. Thank you so much. Have a great evening and look forward to the next episode. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it.
You too. Take care now. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Policy for Normal People. I'm your host, Christy Amada, and I'm joined by special guest Marcus Sturdivant, Senior. Hi, Marcus. Again, very excited to continue the second, we'll call it part two of the breakdown of the big, beautiful bill as it's been characterized and officially named in the act now. Um, Marcus, welcome back. How have you been since we last talked?
Hey, thanks for having me back. I've
Yeah,
been great. I hope everything's been good with you. Just taking in a lot of this bill that's been going on. There's a lot of things that have come out. So some of the fog is cleared, but there's still a lot of things that, I mean, it's a 900-page bill, so a lot still in there.
absolutely. And of course, that's every piece of legislation and policy, right? I mean, they just get longer and longer. It kind of I can't help but think as a conservation minded person, just all the talk about saving and recycling. And, if we got rid of the amount of paper we use just to write policies and legislation alone, we'd probably save a few 100,000 trees, maybe. I don't know.
So
But yeah, so it is a lot to unpack. We are not attempting here to unpack every piece of it, but we talked about last week using a kind of a scenario of a family of four, and I think if you agree, we kind of came to the conclusion, roughly speaking, that a family of four, two children, mom and dad both working. That and obviously there's a lot of different factors for each person and family out there that will influence decision making and what the impact of this bill and its tax provisions, as well as tariffs, which were outside of that, but definitely an impact factor. We'll talk a little bit about that today. In fact, a good bit more. But I think it'd be fair to say that we concluded the first episode by kind of coming to the conclusion that some things it's just too early to tell how it's going to land. But it seems like there are going to be some middle class families, even lower income families, that are going to fall through some cracks because there's going to be potential trade-offs and nullification where credits, deductions, and so forth are going to land first short term and then later longer term, because we talked about last time, as you remember, Marcus, that a lot of the enticements in the beginning will expire in terms of those credits and deductions. So this week, I know we had said from last time, Marcus, we wanted to also pull in tariffs, talk a little bit about that. So I think we'll definitely go that route, folks. If you did not catch the first episode with us, in fact, the absolute first episode, because this is season one of this brand new podcast, we started off breaking down this bill, Marcus and I, on a previous episode. So feel free to check that out. You can get that anywhere that you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, etc. So this is sort of part two. And just to sort of recap about what policy for normal people is real quick, we push aside the politics, and I just like to have casual discussions with guest experts in various fields, with the idea that regardless of what all the politics and machinations are around policies and bills, once they're passed, especially, but even in terms of the ongoing talks as they're coming to fruition, how does that really impact people like you and me, just normal, average working class Americans trying to get through our day, trying to raise children, trying to save for retirement. And Marcus, can you tell us a little bit? I'll segue that into what ABC Squared, your financial services business, does, and give us a little overview of what you think this bill, how it might impact, in a general sense, things like retirement savings, the financial services advice that you may give to your clients. Let's just start with that, and what can you tell us about what you're telling your clients right now in terms of what to wait on, what to watch, what to do, any general advice that you would have, retirement, for instance.
right. So at the ABC Squared, we are a retirement investment advisory firm. So we help folks with, investments, protection if they may need it. But, we really like to help with financial planning. So that's where that will fall in, holistic financial planning. So from beginning to end. Uh, with the recent, just, the whole development, the way the economy's been going this year, it's been a detox is what it was called, and it looks like there's been a detox or rechange. It's happening right now in the economy and the way the global economies are doing. I like to think of it as a new market with the stock market, the way things were once valued, like more on fundamentals. It seems like momentum has just taken over that with stocks, like certain stocks or investments that just carry and grow, like traditional ways that value is shown and grown and created has been expanded in this time, just even since COVID. So there are different approaches for everyone as to how they should be investing. Generally, I tell them unless you're like already retired, you have time. This detox is turning the economy right now. It's going to work out because markets will figure it out, investors will figure it out. corporations will figure it out. We're back to a point now with some of the clarity we've had from the bill where this week we have some trade talk going on. We'll have a lot of corporate earnings. We'll have like 33% of the corporate earnings. We've already had like one third of them out of the way. So we'll have Fed speak. So we'll know something from the Federal Reserve meeting. So we'll have a lot. We're just focusing on the actual data, the actual information. We're not listening to the noise. We're not listening to uh, tariffs and trade agreements that may or may not be happening because they all seem to be pretty much in principle. Some are signed, but few details.
Mhm.
So unless you just retired or you're in retirement right now, and even if you are, if you're retired right now, we just retired, we would definitely, if you needed money, we'd be taking it from a cash position, which we would have increased right before you retired, which allows time for your investments to grow. So with some of the tax bills and tax advantages that are happening right now, there are definitely opportunities for small business owners, which are some of my clients, and just households in general, Main Street to Wall Street.
Excellent. And I know I mentioned on the first episode, Marcus, I love your tagline, helping Main Street meet Wall Street and try to translate what that means for the average person, normal person on the ground, right? So appreciate what you do for folks. Yeah, thank you for that overview. I think your points about a lot of what's going on right now are right on in the sense that it doesn't sound to me from what you said, and certainly what I've been reading too, that it would probably be a mistake to be jumping too quick and making impromptu, rash decisions or changes, major changes in one's investment portfolio. Would you say that's a good advice for right now? Just let things continue to settle.
Yeah, especially when you're referring to like investing in like stocks or bonds. I know that's not where we're going here per se, but
Yeah.
if you make drastic moves in the stock market, so for example, the pullback we just had earlier this year, like some of the worst days and some of the best days were within like a week or 10 days of each other. So if you were a person who was like when you saw everything go down, like sell everything, I'm going to cash, and then you instead of just sitting in there, or if you had time to stay invested, buying more. That was a strategy we used. We started buying more for people who could afford it. You know, some people can afford to put more towards their investments, but if they could, we increased their investments inside their 401ks, retirement accounts. We increased their up to the match as far as they could and above it if we could, just for a short time. And what you generally find in that situation is that people just they kind of get used to it and then they see greater returns inside their investment retirement accounts. So you have to stay your course. You have to know your why. And that doesn't just go for investing with stocks or bonds. If you're buying a house, if you're buying a property, if you're investing in that, if you're investing in your small business and you're making long-term expenditures, this bill definitely helps people who are looking to make long-term expenditures inside their small business with the accelerated depreciation. So things like that, where they can take 100% bonus depreciation from something they bought this year all the way up to like January of this year. So it could be $1 million piece of equipment they can just take and depreciate it. So there are definitely a lot of ways that this bill is helping people out. Some of those things are starting to come out more clear. One example is when we were speaking last time, we were talking about that family of four and how it wouldn't necessarily help with their education, maybe, but they have expanded some of the child tax credits for with businesses if they want to give their employees per se more money for childcare. So if that husband somehow had his wife on the payroll, perhaps, and she was somehow working, with the children or taking time out for the children, it would be an increased portion for that, or even just towards childcare in general. So there's just a lot of stuff inside that bill that just keeps coming loose or coming out.
Yeah, interesting. Did I hear you right that so there's credit for childcare is a credit is what you said for child to help with childcare if the if both parents are working. And then
Right.
did you also say that even if that some of that can be applied towards say a stay-at-home parent?
Yeah, I'm not. So yeah, there's definitely where. So if the parent is, if you have to put your child in child care, I think it was like 20 some odd percent, went to like 35%. And yeah, usually with those things, when a person has to lose a portion of their income to stay home and take care of something for their family, there's usually some type of way. Like think about people who take care of long-term care for their spouse. There's usually a way that you get paid for that if you can't work anymore. There's a deduction, or they'll actually send you a check sometimes if you have to be the primary caregiver for your spouse. So those type of things are definitely.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of hits home a little bit, but probably a little too late for me. My children are grown, but I stayed home with them until the second of both children were they were both going to school, and you could always claim your dependents and so forth back then, but there wasn't any really special credit or anything that you could use. Maybe a little bit of child care credit. I know that's been around for a while, but um, is this new credit, is it new, first of all, and is it significantly more in value than what we've traditionally seen in maybe the last 20 years or so that it's been around?
Excuse me. I don't think it's new. I think it's just a expansion of the current uh, policy that they already have. Another thing with the child care or with children, because the person we were talking about had children who were doing like extracurricular activities. I don't think they were like college
Okay.
age, but there are like even increased benefits for uh, putting towards your child's college where you can deduct some of the money now. But with the new changes to the actual like student loan program and where they've taken out like a lot of different ways, I think they've gone down to like two ways that you can now get student loan forgiveness, where before you had four, five, six, several different ways. They eliminate at least three of the primary ways. So that's a give before it got you right there. But that's just like applying it specifically to that family we were talking about in the first example. The family of four, 200,000, mom's a state employee and dad owns a business.
Yeah.
Little kids who aren't getting
So,
much
so
benefit.
yeah, the student debt thing, I know we talked about it a little bit last time. We hit on it. So you're saying they've eliminated quite a few things, even though they're, um, well, I think what I saw too was, isn't the if you do get student loan forgiveness or have gotten it, and I don't know if this is retroactive, maybe you can tell us, but it's going to be counted as ordinary income on taxation, correct?
So the income on the student loan debt is there's always been like a way that if you didn't have your student loans or if you earned too much, that it could have been counted for like a small percentage of income, like just
Mhm.
like many people that never have that applied to. I think it did get maybe expanded more or permanent into the new policy as far as that goes. As far as like student loan, the system now, they're making it so they're eliminating some of the, like I said earlier, repayment options. They're eliminating some of the plans, so they're making it a lot more streamlined, I guess is what they're going for, efficient. They're putting a lot more scrutiny on the people inside these small businesses or anyone who are actually applying for student loans. They're making sure that you're actually the person you're applying for, you meet the merits that you're applying for. So they're putting more funds to that. But I think on the other side of that, as you have only have so much of a budget, they're losing the ability to actually process these people who are seeking loans and loan forgiveness. Another thing that they added is that you can have student loan debt like default on your payments twice now. Where it was one time you can only get forgiveness one time, the plans before. Now you have opportunity to get it a second time. But with the changes to the plans, it's like harder to get to a position where you can actually get these student loans. And with the loss of these guardrails inside the plans, it's more likely that a person may default a second time. So it's just like, once again, the give me to the gotcha.
Interesting. So it's sort of giving more in one sense, but then the ability to meet that criteria, whatever that criteria is being restricted, correct? Or it's more difficult to get there. Are you referring to kind of the bureaucracy to manage it, or is it more what the burden on the individual is to meet whatever criteria it is for them to get the loan?
A little bit of both, more of the latter. Definitely, the onus has been in this detox and reshifting of the economy. It's been putting the uh, financial responsibility back on the individual. So they're giving more power to the individual, I guess, but the individual also is going to have way more chance to fall off and go into default or not be able to make these loans. They are, I'm trying to think, they're capping some of the amounts that you can have taken out for a certain amount of time. Um, but it's just in general, like I said, they're reducing the workforce inside of the IRS for certain parts. I'm sorry, inside of the student loan department, USDA, US. student Department of Education. And
Yeah.
then also on the other side, they're like, increasing. So they're decreasing, increasing. It's going to be a net negative. Is that where AI comes in for some of those jobs that have become redundant or that one person can watch 5 or 10 machines do? These are just so, it's like fascinating as far as those things go, where the
And you mentioned AI, and that kind of brings up a thought that in the midst of so much change and so much fluctuation, both in terms of facilitating any measures that are put in, but also the new, just that there are going to be, different and new provisions and ways of doing things for good, bad, or other. AI is further complicating the mix, right? I mean, could be good, could be bad, but always it seems like the short term of technology, sometimes there's some confusion and I worry about people being, falling through the cracks, as we figure all this out. It doesn't, it seems like we're trying to really race full speed ahead to get AI integrated into pretty much every facet of life, professional, personal, and otherwise, especially professional though. Um, I don't know, just it just strikes me as I wonder, do you have a feeling about that? Maybe you're a little more positive than I am. I'm a little more pessimistic about how ready we are for the all the changes in policy and its impacts on people, and then how AI plays a role.
Right. Well, AI was a big part of the bill as well. Like there were people who are part of that bill. Well, not a big
Right.
part, but it was a sticking point for several of the holdouts was that they wanted to keep the AI either, where the states can make changes, where the government can make changes. So that was a big part of it as far as it goes. AI is a revolutionary technology. Like it's going to continue to grow. Well, I don't know if we've all seen it, but a lot of us have seen Terminator 2. So like that's, worst case scenario is that where AI takes us, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of
AI.
ominous Netflix movies, right, too, with the robot taking over the home kind of thing.
Right, like they're just, and people are like, once you see it in a movie, it's already happened, like Jurassic Park type stuff, cloning DNA from dinosaurs now. But it's just, I mean, AI is here. People need to figure out, I guess, how to integrate it and use it. Cybersecurity is going to be a really big thing with AI. It's just coming out. If what we're really seeing is what we're really seeing from the people we're really receiving it from, like, so where we're getting this information is going to be very important when it comes to AI. And if we can't just go to a society where we solely rely on AI for our information. Like,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In fact, I've done some fun little thing, test cases and with the Chat GPT and other AI platforms, just playing around, and I'll ask it a question. Like this morning, I asked it a question about tariffs, and I said, you know, um, do tariffs cause inflation? That was one of the questions. And then I put in a question. I just pulled these out of nowhere. Um, you know, do, does do tariffs harm the economy or help the economy? It was a question like that kind of. And what you find, a lot of times, as you probably know yourself, Marcus, AI is, of course, scanning the internet in a way that's just faster and arguably more efficient than when you traditionally go in and tell people to Google it. The idea of Googling something is going to fall by the wayside perhaps eventually, because I rarely go to my browser anymore. But what's interesting about the results, the return I got, was that you could it often will tell you what the sources are that it's finding, where it's finding things, and depending upon whether that's a left leaning, a right leaning, or a centrist sort of publication or editorial, or news media, wherever it's coming from, or study, that's the answers that you're getting. So it's going to be there are still humans behind the algorithms, and I think your point is a good one. We should still, as we have been saying all along with the internet, it's still internet research, and whatever's out there is what's going to come back. And then you also have a human behind the algorithm originally, who is, to some extent influencing how it's going to operate, and the way in which it's going to collect information. So it I think it's going to be an interesting technology that there will be some winners and losers, just like every new technology that's ever come to us throughout history. And harnessing it too will be a challenge for legislators, policymakers, and for us normal people, just trying to figure out where it fits and integrates into our everyday life, right?
right. So yeah, AI. So just an example, they're using the AI right now in one of the Doge efforts to see if they can find regulations that we don't need anymore that could be eliminated. So they're just like combing through. And like you said, AI pulls resources just from the internet, just from any type of sources. So depending on the large language model it was trained on, depending on the source, you're going to get a specifically different answer. But the thing with a lot of legislation is like, so even if it just pulls this legislation and thinks that it is no longer effective or is no longer prudent for times now, the reason that this legislation was created may not be in that information, like the exact specific thing that it stops. And maybe it finds some legislations that it takes this part out and it makes the other part of something else completely unconstitutional, like a regulation or something inside of the decree, just because it doesn't understand the basis of why this law was created. Because that's another thing about laws. Like when you create laws, right, you have to have what this law is created for, how the law is going to be enacted, and the penalty if you break the law. Like you have to have all those things into the law, right? So if it's not finding the exact reason for why it's created, it's going to just create crazy, or if it has a hallucination, it could just have crazy results for all people, or just a target group of people. It doesn't matter if it's one person, 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people. You don't want to have someone hurt by technology for something that's completely not anything that they've ever done.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Great points. I mean, there's just so many unknowns right now. Well, kind of pulling our conversation back to that how the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is going to impact all of us in various ways. I know last time we said that we wanted to talk about tariffs a little bit, so let's take a few minutes to maybe talk about that. That's in some ways outside the bill, but do you have any thoughts, just generally speaking, on the tariff negotiations relative to how they may or may not impact the intentions of that bill now that
Right.
it's passed?
Yeah, so tariffs, like while they're not part of the bill, like the budget office didn't use tariff revenue as it's definitely tariffs are definitely part of this plan, right? They're planning on using tariff revenue to
Yeah,
offset some of the deficit. Like that's definitely part of the plan, where they say it, where they're not, whether it's like included in the bill. They have said it's part of the policy. The administration is putting that out there. It's also included with the Fed lowering interest rates. Like they want interest rates lowered to work into reducing the amount of the deficit that we're paying back, or the cost, I guess, of paying back the deficit if we reduce the interest rates. As far as tariffs go in general, so right now, I feel like where we sit with tariffs, so the data hasn't shown tariffs really been hit by consumers yet. It looks as if the manufacturers are butting the grunt tariffs right now. They're taking the most of the blow. But how long is that going to last, right? How long will they take that? How long before they start to pass that off onto corporate or onto Main Street, right? How long will corporations take it? The first time Trump enacted his tariffs back in 2017, corporations bore them for a while. So just looking to see if these tariffs are transitory. I know it's a bad word, so if they're going to hit and then just be a one-time price shot and go through. But that's why it's crucial for these earnings that are coming out this week, just to see the forecast from these corporations, see how the consumer is spending, if the consumer is stressed. Because even as recent as the last time we talked, consumer sentiment has gone up a lot compared to where it was before. We just have so much economic data coming in now to go with the tariffs as well. So we have this week, we have jobs report. Like I said, we have the Federal Reserve speaking. Um, and then we have the negotiations going on, as you said. I think we just heard the EU is possible. They have a agreement in place. So you were talking about specific places. So the 15% tariff on autos in the EU, right? It was like 2% last year. So like that's a big jump for the EU. For us, it's like,
sure.
oh, okay, we're getting this tariff revenue. So it's just like a lot of conciliations coming in these deals. Like they're just saying, like, we're going to spend money, we're going to buy your energy, but how are you going to buy our energy from these tariffs? You're going to buy it from credits, or you're going to actually buy the energy, or it's just there's a lot of unknowns inside of all the trade deals. I think the market and even the economy right now is just kind of going along business as usual, just assuming, waiting for something. It's going to keep going up until something bad happens. And if something bad does happen, like one of these trade deals falls through, it's just like terrible. Like then you can see like a downward shift. Even I think if the economic data comes out a little bit rougher here the next couple months, because people are thinking the Fed will cut interest rates here soon. Like maybe not this meeting, but maybe in September.
He's a little hesitant though, right? I mean, that isn't this kind of behind some of the friction between Trump and Jerome Powell that Trump wants the rates cut now, and Powell is kind of holding off, or not wanting to
Right.
jump
Right.
too soon with that. And I find that interesting. I mean, some of the talk in the media, makes it sound like, and I'm not suggesting that it's not going that way. But there's almost this alarmist view that oh, we're losing the independence of the Fed. But we've been here before. Presidents, especially when they're worried about reelection, we know what happened with Nixon. Um, they really do try to put pressure on the Fed chair, and of course, it's not just the Fed chair that makes those final decisions. Even there's a whole board involved there, but it's fascinating to me, sometimes the way it's being spoken about as if we're seeing this pressure as the loss of independence of the Fed, and I kind of personally question, but I want your view on this. I don't has it ever been fully independent, and does it depend sometimes on who's in office, and who's more amicable with whom? What do you think?
Fed independence. In theory, yeah, it has been independent, right? But there have been examples of federal chairs who curtailed to their presidents. I think the late 70s, and you saw
Definitely.
it happen, like just hyper uber inflation just came into the fray. As far as Jerome Powell goes and his tariff policies and the pressure he's receiving from the White House is he keeps saying with the same message. He actually said either in front of Congress or a public speaking event right after that if tariffs weren't in the picture, they probably would have already cut rates or would have already begun to cut rates.
Yeah.
So look for, maybe at this meeting that he'll just start to signal like, yeah, if the data comes in this way, maybe in September we can look at cutting rates,
Yeah.
lower interest rates, or even look at lower interest rates until or in October later in the second half of the year. So I don't know if President Trump's going to get his lower interest rates anytime soon, maybe later in this year. The president did throw out, because he says for the housing market, as well, not just the debt repayment, but
And it's
that's
bank lending in general, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we always think of the housing market, which is the big, one of the big ones, of course. But um, cutting rate, if the Fed rate is not like other interest rates, right? Can you speak to that a little bit about, why that's a little more complex in terms of how cutting or raising, lowering that rate can affect the economy, broadly speaking?
right. So the Fed has so many tools, right? They can raise or lower that rate. If they lower the rate, then it's cheaper for them to buy more of their bonds, which is what a lot of the mortgages are backed on, like 10-year bonds. If they raise the rate, it makes it more expensive for people to buy those bonds, right? So that actually like shrinks the economy and the amount of people that can borrow. Another tool that they have is the amount of reserves that they require banks to keep. So they can require them to have a certain amount of money where they are liquid, in case a bank run comes. Banks have stress tests put on by the Fed. The most recent one the banks perform exceedingly well. It's looking like one of the things that the current administration wants is a raise on the level, uh, or actually lowering the level that the Fed requires banks to hold. As far as the Fed fund rate, so that's the bank's rate, but the discount rate's the actual rate set by the Fed, right? So whatever that rate is, the overnight rate is what they call it, is going to be lower than what banks are actually charging because banks are going to have to make their profit on interest rates as well. The way the system is set up, I mean, for better or worse, it was initially set up where the Federal Reserve was getting interest payments from the banks were actually getting interest payments from the Federal Reserve to hold that money. But at a certain point, it got more beneficial to the banks with less risk to just sit there and take their interest payments from the from the government versus maybe releasing some of that money out into the public. So that's a question, I guess, depending on your politics or your point of view as to another way the Fed is behind the curve or if Chairman Powell should be out. I also think right now they don't have enough data with the new insertion of tariffs to have made cuts yet, but we can see where it comes. The data will tell that.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we know today that supposedly Trump came to a deal with the EU about at a 15% rate. And then, as you mentioned, I think a little bit earlier, I think it was what, 600 million euro that they've promised to put towards buying military equipment and energy. Um, saw that today. And all of this is, just push and pull factors that a lot of it really is, it's tough to gauge right now, I think. Is it fair to say that not only should individuals just kind of hold where they are and wait and watch, but I think businesses are doing that too, except in maybe certain sectors, right?
Yeah, businesses definitely were a lot more worried earlier this year, February, when you came out with the tariff chart. I don't know if you remember that chart. You came out with the tariffs that had the list of all the countries,
Yeah.
but that was Liberation Day. But and then in February, when they were announcing like how harsh the tariffs may be, there was a lot of uh, back and forth whipsawing in the economy in the stock market as well. So just with more clarity, that's what businesses want, because businesses don't usually invest 1 year, 6 months. They're investing 5, 10, 20 years, depending on the business. They want to make long-term investments.
Hmm.
So as I go back to the bill that we're talking about now, with the ability just to like appreciate uh, bonuses, depreciation, pull that forward. That helps businesses with their decisions as far as like what they can invest in capitally. They can make further. They can go ahead and say, well, we can go ahead and spend this $5 million right now because it's going to be, it'll be taken off of our bill for this year. And then that's just like a refund for them for buying equipment. So businesses, the policy and the taxes in general, the way taxes are set up, I hate to say it, they're not really set up for like W-2 earners. They're more set up for 1099 owners. They're not really set up for retirement savers. They're more set up for like investors. It's just kind of how it is. It's like if it's more set up for business growth. That's just kind of how the American tax code is set up.
Yeah.
You see the bigger breaks there.
And I don't pretend to have all of this figured out myself, certainly. So, appreciate folks like you coming on, and I know you've recommended to me, and I've been in touch with a gentleman that's an expert on, how this all may shake out for small businesses, and we've talked, and I think he's going to be on the show, so I'm excited about that. Um, I'm a history buff, and I'm also, so I like to look at like what's happening now, but what's happened before, and how does that all um, matter, in terms of what we're experiencing and what we might expect to experience with all of this. And, bringing this conversation back to, the average person like myself and the family of four that, our fictional example that we kind of use as an anchor to focus our discussions and bring it back to. I keep thinking about, globalization and, the so-called free trade era that I know um, those who are very much in support of Trump's policies and Republicans in Congress right now. Um, there's this, when we think about what we pay, higher prices for goods, possibly services, because they tend to be impacted, a little bit later, um, depending upon what they are. But then you look at manufacturing or you look at productivity, and I know, and you and I talked about this a little bit offline, even Marcus, but it's curious. I'm curious how this is all going to shake out. And, there's a lot of talk about how what's in that bill is going to benefit more the upper 1%, the upper crust, right? The wealthier, both in terms of corporations, but, as well as individuals with considerable wealth. But part of the reason that you notice that Trump won, and again, this program is not about politics, so it's not a reference to whether that's good or bad. But a lot of people felt left behind in decades past. I'd say, definitely since the '70s when we had stagflation, and then from there the globalization era comes in, and supposedly there's free trade, but we know that didn't totally exist because there were plenty of countries that had tariffs on US goods, even if we had lower or slightly higher on them. So there's always been tariffs. I think there's some in the public now that would probably, have a misconception about the way it's being reported, that the tariffs that are being put in place is some kind of not brand new, but it new for this era. But in fact, we really have never had free trade, have we? Not entirely. Have you? Can you ever think? Can you think of a time when there was zero tariffs either in either direction for any country?
Tariffs, I mean, America has a long history with tariffs. We basically used tariffs before we had like an income tax up until like 100 years ago. Tariffs were
Right.
used to produce income in America. So tariffs have like pretty much always been a part of American history, right? Like just at some level, some things are tariff higher, some countries are tariff higher. Like Vietnam, I think we had a tariff on Vietnam. They didn't have a tariff on us. Like some countries we tariffed that didn't even have tariffs on us when we came out with the initial tariff threat. As far as globalization goes, so people always think about with globalization, they think about the economic impact of globalization, supply chains, because you do get like cheaper labor costs in other parts of the world. But a big thing and a big reason that globalization happened was because America needed more ideas. America was falling behind as far as like
Mm,
ideas was going. We were making these big cars, like it was a lot with the auto industry where it started. Like we were making these big gas guzzling cars, and we saw that like the Japanese or these uh, Asian car makers were making these cars that were much like more fuel efficient. They were just working better and they were making them at a much cheaper cost. So we went integrated with them just to see like different things, just the way they work, Kaizen, Sigma, Six, those types of things, right? Those all came from globalization. So the idea sharing with globalization is just as much of an impact as the actual financial impact because you don't want to have a big brain drain leave the country. I think the administration is starting to see that now as you look at the work visas they're talking about, including where at the beginning of the administration, we're talking about pretty much excluding all of those, even with companies like Microsoft laying off a lot of employees, and then the vice president saying that you're laying off these employees, but you're asking for visas for employees to come from overseas. Like that's not the balance that we want. We want to create jobs inside of America. J.D. Vance, his words, So paraphrasing. But globalization, so as far as yeah, obviously the cost to like make things abroad are going to be cheaper, certain things like sneakers. But then you have to think, are there certain jobs like people don't necessarily want? Like people, I don't know, and there's nothing wrong with any job anyone does. Do your job, earn your money, however I'm not here to tell you what to do. But there are people at this class, this generation, we're not used to making sneakers in America. We're not used to seeing big smokestacks really come out from the factories. You're talking about bring all these factories back, but like, where are you going to build them? Who
mm.
really wants that next to their house? It's those type of things.
Yeah. And it's tricky because there are still clearly products and materials that we need from those types of manufacturing. So what are we saying as a country? I mean, there's a lot of people who were frustrated in the middle class, lower to middle class income brackets where they were more closer to the upper middle class during the manufacturing era and the industrialization and on through and those who people who worked in those types of factories here in the United States. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of people who, in subsequent generations wanted to move on from factory work, for instance, and went to college. I mean, my generation kind of, I think we Gen Xers represent, you and I, the generation of many who saw for the first time their children go to college. And I was one of those, I was the first in my family to go to college. And that's not a bad thing. That was seen as progress. But what a lot of people, right or wrong, tend to also say about the globalization and about the offshoring of certain industries and manufacturing and so forth, factories, is that yes, we quote unquote clean things up, there's environmental impact and all that, but are we did we sell out those jobs and not create opportunities for people who lost those jobs at the same time? And now we're seeing a backlash because of resentment that's kind of built up over decades. And I don't know that, and I think that you've got kind of a really big mixing bowl of all of it, right? You've got the younger generations, as you said rightly, that really don't want to do certain jobs. But then you also have people working in tech STEM fields and all who are complaining even now. And I've seen evidence of this where they're training their H-1B replacements or something, training their foreign worker visa replacements when they're still fully capable and have lots of experience doing the job. But oftentimes that person coming in on a visa through no fault of their own, but they're getting paid a lower wage and they're willing to accept that because that's a trade-off to come to America, which is where they want to be. We give out most of those visas right now. I saw this just the other day to Indian immigrants that are coming over to take a lot of STEM jobs, in particular computer science and engineering and things like that. So it's complicated, right? I mean, we've created in many ways through mass immigration, we've created um, a lot of people over time in the last few decades who have come in and taken those other jobs. I don't mean taken like stole, but just they assume those roles. Um, and it's true that you had American workers, native born or even long-term green card holder immigrants who were in some of these jobs and either retired out of them or moved out of them, moved up maybe, in some cases. And there was sort of a vacuum that immigrants filled. And when we say that they contributed to society, they certainly did. But now the question is, I think, in all of this is what what kind of stabilization are we trying to achieve, perhaps? And I'm not just talking about immigration policy, although it's definitely an impact factor. But in the bigger picture of what we've been talking about, as all of these deals with tariffs and the new bill that's been passed with major tax cuts, um, we've got you're getting revenue right now, right, from the tariff deals. Even when they're still being negotiated, we're seeing, even if it's just a couple months at a time, there's like a bucket of funds that's coming in for particular goods and imports. But what that's all going to shake out to in different sectors, I would think. What are your thoughts on this markets? Do you think that there's enough consideration, bringing this back to the normal person like myself and people like me on our trying to get our heads around all of this on our front porches? Is there enough, both in that bill as well as what's happening with tariffs, regardless of what the stated intentions are? Do you think that there's enough safeguards? I'm not talking about safety nets, but safeguards in general with taxation, credits, deductions, the tariff negotiations. Do you think that there's enough being done to safeguard the average American who is likely to maybe fall into some cracks there, like we talked about in the last episode, where they may be able to take advantage of one opportunity here, but it's going to expire, or they take advantage of it, but then they're going to get hit some other way. Like, how do you see the average person making out in this? It's a big question, I know.
Yeah, no, I'm just sitting here thinking about. So yeah, so as far right, AI is coming in and advancing different jobs, right? Immigration. So as you said, the immigrants came in and filled a certain void for certain gap. And this time when we went from globalization to where we're coming back now to onshoring, which I mean, COVID shows an example of where like our medical supplies and some of the things we needed, we just couldn't get. So yeah, nearshoring, onshoring definitely was something we need to work at bringing back, getting just back towards helping ourselves. The balance of that's to be determined to be discovered by
Mm,
someone else. But you need a certain mix of onshore and offshoring. So as these jobs and these people with immigration are either being forced in, forced out. We're not even talking about like the mental part of it, but just like the physical part. These people were also consumers, right? So they spend a lot of money inside of the economy, right? So we went from a goods driven economy to now where we're a service driven economy. Like
yes.
even from like industrialization uh, or globalization till now, we're that's the shift. So
Mm,
now we're a service driven economy. So you look and you think, okay, how are we going to replace these jobs? AI is going to replace certain jobs. I read an article the other day of a startup in Britain where they have robots that can now lay bricks, like bricklaying robots, like boom,
wow.
boom, boom. So they're going to be able to build things. They're testing that out. They could possibly do this 24 hours a day. So that would, if they could get that technology up, right, that would be building homes. That would be AI that could build homes. That would eliminate a lot of some of these jobs because some of these people are in uh, the home building area, services area as well as how they earn their income. So if they
Mm,
find ways to mitigate that type of stuff, obviously you have these AI assistants coming in and eliminating the roles from, I believe we spoke about AI assistants, like assistants, like maybe a virtual assistant that's not an actual person, but just like an AI assistant. So as these jobs are eliminated, and then as you're not, so those roles like these robots and machines, while they're creating efficiencies, that's just going back to the corporation. It's not the same as having a person being able to go out and spend that money themselves. Like this robot's not going to lay their bricks and then go after the shift and buy dinner for their family or go out to their local bar or whatever it is they do and spend money back into the economy. So it takes that money away and puts more money back into the pocket of corporations, I guess. As far as the bill goes, yeah, it definitely pays bigger benefits to the top 1% in the longer run, maybe even in the short run. There are some benefits for the lower class, middle class, in the immediate run or the near term. One thing I noticed the other day I read is that they're actually changing out some of the rates and names for brackets. So it's like low class, working class, which is like 100,000 to like a million, I
Mm.
think, net worth, and then like middle class is like a million to 5 or 10 million now. So they're like changing the brackets. So that's like
Wow.
small things too, like changing brackets, changing psychology, changing what these things mean to people when they hear them, when they see them.
Hmm. Wow, that alone, the psychological factor can have a huge impact on, not to mention where you do fall in terms of your returns every year, and how you're classified, right? Um,
Right. One of the we were talking about the student loans, I believe. So one of these student loans, the it's called RAP, the Resistance Repayment Assistance Program. So they're proposing where it's like broke off in the brackets to where you pay, I think like 0 to 10,000, you pay like $10 maybe. But it's like, or maybe it's like 9.99, but it's like in $10,000 bracket increments. So you could go from like paying this like one is percentage. So you could go from being like paying 1% and earning like $1 more the next year and going to a whole nother percentage, which will change a lot in what you're able to receive or pay with your student loans. So that's another change in the student loan program. I did want to mention that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Well, I know there's just so much here, and as we're talking, I always think of a million more things that we could bring up, Marcus. But really appreciate your insights, and as we kind of go towards wrapping up, I did want to talk just the last few seconds here about the Trump baby fund. What's the official name of it? I forget.
To Trump, that's
I've
what
heard so
everyone
many
calls it
different
now.
things.
Yeah. Yes.
But
Yes.
this is the what, the $1,000 at birth, right? And I know we talked last time that we're not really sure. It wasn't clarified, I think, that how that was all going to be structured, or what department, or how it's even going to be facilitated and paid out, and then how are we tracking it and so forth. Maybe it'll be AI. I don't know.
Sure, it'll be
Yeah.
AI at some
Um,
point.
I don't know, but any last thoughts on that? Because we kind of wrapped up last time and didn't have a lot of time to spend on it. Have you learned anything new about how that's all going to work? The baby fund, since we last talked.
Gotcha. Yeah. So just a little clarity, like we said last time, the Trump, the baby account. So they will start with like $1,000 in there, and then parents can contribute, I think maybe up to $5,000 a year into those accounts up till maybe age 18. You can contribute in there. At age 18, a child can take it for like college expenses, with the tax-free growth, not pay a penalty. I think you have up to 25 or 30, age 30 to take it for a home. You can use it for that. If you don't take it at that time, then you have to convert it to a Roth, pay the taxes on it, or you may be able to let it grow, but you won't get the same return. Like every time, at every step where you take out money, the longer you keep it in there, the better it's for you, just like with most retirement accounts, right?
Right.
But there have been people who are saying, why not just use a 529? It's definitely not the best vehicle for that right now, as the way it's set up. There are other options for parents and savers for college who are looking to accumulate funds to pay for their children's future expenses. So it's definitely a good idea and concept. I don't know how the execution is being played out properly. It's just they're just still better options. 529 is still just a fine option as it is.
Are
With
you
the
required to
contribution,
put it in a Roth? You can't, do you have a choice about what kind of investment fund to put it in?
well, well, no, I don't think you're required to put in a Roth, right? But if you were to just transfer it, if you were going to pay the tax on it, it probably would be best to put in the Roth. I guess that depends on your matter of opinion. If you're going to take it out to
Yeah.
put it down for a home payment, for your home payment, that would be a different thing. But if you was planning on sitting there and letting it run,
Right,
pay the
right.
taxes when you want to pay them. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the baby account is definitely a good thing if it helps see, that's another thing. So maybe a lot more Americans will have access to savings accounts for their children with this.
Mhm.
But as we mentioned last time, this expires in 2028. So this account
Oh, the
will,
Trump fund, the baby fund.
yeah, the baby
So
fund
we're all
expires.
supposed to hurry up and have babies between now and 2020.
Yeah, so this too expires, right? This isn't a permanent thing. So just other reasons why people say maybe I should just stick with the 529.
Yeah, yeah. And that is an option. It's gonna stay as far as you know, the 529.
Yeah, 529, uh, UT, GMAs, those are still here. Grant Trust for the minors. Yeah,
Okay,
those are still here.
very good. Well, we'll kind of wrap it up. I mean, there's so many other things that, I'd love to get into, Marcus, but this has been great, and I hope to have you on again in the future. I know you continually watch the market and do your analysis, and I learned so much from you, even today, just getting some clarifications on a couple of things. Um, and really appreciate your time. And folks, if you get a chance, please check out Marcus's information on LinkedIn. And what's your website address? Is it abcsquared.com?
TheABCSquare.com.
TheABCsquared.com. All right.
ABC
Excellent.
squared.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
please do check out um, his services for financial planning, retirement. You have life insurance as well, right?
Yeah, life and health
Yeah.
if you need
Excellent.
it.
Very good, very good. Well, any last words, Marcus, for your listeners? Any words of wisdom as we try to continue to navigate this strange time we're in?
Gotcha. So I have the sage, but I don't know if I have the wisdom right. Just thank you so much for the opportunity to sit on talk with you. Hopefully this helps some people maybe clarify a couple things. Obviously, there's still a lot inside the bill that we haven't even uncovered or began to uncover. So everyone just keep listening to Christy. She'll keep you filled in with the bill and all the stuff that's affecting, normal people as far as policy goes. So
We
just
sure
thanks for having
will.
me
We
on.
sure will. Yeah, we sure will. And folks, please, reach out to Marcus. He's got an open door. He's very approachable. If you got questions, ask. And you put a regular column, I think, too, on your. I know on your LinkedIn page you often have articles posted on there, and so you very
Yeah,
informative.
LinkedIn is definitely like my most active place social media wise. I'm on there. I guess that's my social media. But yeah, I'm in a lot of different articles, like
Fantastic.
weekly it seems. So
Appreciate you, Marcus. Thank you very, very much. Thanks, folks, for listening. This is Policy for Normal People with Christy Amata, your host, and sponsored by my business, Amata Development Services, serving nonprofits and small businesses in marketing, communications, and fundraising. Um, Reach out to either of us if you need financial services or if you need communication services, reach out to me. And that's it for episode 2. I'll see you again next time, everybody. Thanks, Marcus.
thanks, Chris.
Take care. Bye bye.